So my name is Jacob. I'm the founder and CEO of Superpower. But the reality is I should not be here right now. I shouldn't be here right now because I escaped death. I escaped death because 3 years ago I had a life-changing near-death health experience. And the health situation I went through and the almost near-death experience was because of the challenges in healthcare that Dr. Snyder and Mark and all of us have sort of coalesced on today, which is problems with healthcare being very reactive, being siloed. Specialists don't look at the whole picture. There's challenges with incentive systems, and then oftentimes research is about 20 years on average ahead of standard clinical protocol. Except I'd argue that we're actually at the exponential beginning of a J curve where as human knowledge compounds on itself, that 20-year gap is about to look like 100 years. So this was me. Again, images aren't really loading, but 3 years ago I found myself in Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA. I had to have a number of life-changing, life-altering surgeries, lost a number of organs, which I'll get into in a little bit. But this isn't meant to be like a sharing or trauma dump of my tragedy, but rather an inspiring story about hope. And the hope being this paradigm shift to medicine 3.0. So there's a few different ways that you could cut the definition, but the way I like to think about it is that it's this idea of shifting healthcare from a focus of one that is just more chronic disease management, which in my opinion is neither health nor care, into one that looks at health preventatively with a longevity, health span, and lifespan enhancing lens. It's really healthcare as a tool for human performance. And with some of the things we're building at Superpower, the way we think about it is that a new system is needed. So there's this paradigm shift of the old world where, as we understand, health is completely reactive. It's siloed. Your data is not in one place. So thanks for giving us, I guess, the roadmap for some of the things that we're looking to build. And if we do find our way to this new way of thinking about health and healthcare, it means we all get more time on this planet, more times with our loved ones, more times to make an impact, and more time to really do the things that we love. So fast forwarding a few years back to 2021 when I went through this health experience, I'm going to go through a bit of the details just to illustrate some of the challenges. I had been riding really high. So in my early 20s, I started a software company that did quite well. And as sort of business success and all the impact I was able to make in the space we were building in was going up and to the right, my body, unfortunately, was going down into the left. So if this diagram would load, it would actually show an iceberg, which might on the surface look like everything was going right in life. And this is all too often of a story that I hear from other people who have dealt with healthcare's inadequacies, either personally or with those around them. But below the surface, I had all these challenges that were plaguing me daily. Some of them I was kind of aware of, others I was completely unaware of until I discovered this more frontier world of longevity and preventive medicine. So dealing with issues like poor sleep, brain fog, challenges with fatigue, having bizarre allergic reactions to foods, a lot of things that most of us might be experiencing on a daily basis, but don't necessarily connect the dots back to their biological reason. And I decided to get help. So I did what most people do, right? Which is, as an informed citizen, you call a bunch of doctors, get appointments. And unfortunately, they were just baffled with my condition because I'd get a standard CBC CMP blood panel, which is pretty much the 14 markers you get tested during an annual physical, which I listed up there. And all that's really testing for is are you at acute risk of heart attack, death, stroke, blood clot, diabetes, and a handful of other conditions. And I would even do things like bring PubMed papers to all these different physicians I was working with, and it was bizarre that they were basically gaslighting me and telling me this stuff isn't real, there's no evidence, we can't take a look at all this research, we don't understand it, and that's unfortunately all too common of a story. So things came to a head in the middle of 2021, where I found myself in the ER. So all those challenges and problems that had been brewing beneath the surface turned into the actual manifestation of chronic disease. So the way I like to think about the body is anytime you have some sort of problem or a symptom, it's like your mirror has cracks in it. And oftentimes because of the body's regenerative mechanisms, those cracks can oftentimes seal themselves and you can actually heal. But there's other unfortunate cases where those cracks become completely shattered and you are now left with millions of little pieces of glass on the floor, and that's like sometimes an irreversible disease state. So in my situation, I got diagnosed with what's known as Crohn's disease. While I was in the hospital, I also came down with just a really large cytokine storm that led to myocarditis, as well as a spontaneous pneumothorax, which is when your left lung actually implodes on itself. So in order to treat all this, I was given the sort of standard protocol that you get in the hospital, which oftentimes is, especially for autoimmune or like highly inflammatory or like cytokine-based conditions, it's small molecule therapeutics or biologics drugs to sort of modulate certain immune markers within your body. Except the problem is there's like dozens of these drugs. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, trying to match, what your patient presentation is to what the exact mechanism of the drug is, right? Whether you're trying to go after TNF-alpha or a handful of other aspects of the immune system. So there's like no data-driven way that physicians do this right now when people have complex conditions. So I was then told that the only options in front of me were surgery or keep trying more pharmaceuticals with eventually being at risk of full death. So I came down with, after continuing to try the rest of the biologics and pharmaceuticals, what's known as toxic megacolon, which is a condition where like your colon swells up to 3 times the normal size. And they had to intervene and give me a full colectomy, which is actually removing this, really important major organ. And I unfortunately didn't know any better. But coming out of this entire situation, I decided to go a bit deeper on the incentives of what exactly happened to me, and come to find out most major healthcare systems in America, surprise, there's like 50 of them, and they're all like basically multi-decade-billion-dollar corporations, including Stanford, which these are all amazing institutions. I don't have any ill will for the medical system. I'm more just, sharing sort of the facts in how hamstrung patients are just because of the poor incentives that are out there. So a lot of these health systems, they make the majority of their revenue from surgery or pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals, especially like all the biologic drugs I was given, they get like kickbacks or revenue share from the pharmaceutical companies. Oftentimes, hospital systems are vertically integrated, so they have pharmacies and infusion centers within the hospital, so they're making like 20 to 50% more margin on top of the drugs that they're administering. So there's this whole economic entanglement that makes it, kind of the reason why there's really no like root cause treatment for any time someone presents with a chronic disease. And in my case, it made healthcare system millions of dollars, and I got stuck with like a multi-million-dollar bill. But all hope is not lost, because as we established, we're on the precipice of a paradigm shift. There's been tens of billions of dollars in venture capital poured into the digital health space to create new tools, new wearables, hardware devices, innovations that are going to allow healthcare 3.0 to come to the mainstream, where we can move from this world of reactive, symptom-based treatments like what I received, where pharmaceuticals and surgery was the only option for dealing with a complex inflammatory and immune response, where the intervention set is very limited, it's one size fits all, it's a game of whack-a-mole, to one that's like highly data-driven, hyper-personalized, gets at the root cause of the underlying disease, and ultimately leads to better patient outcomes and can be financially incentive aligned. And that's really some of the things that we're starting to build at Superpower, which I'll give you guys a teaser on in a bit. So in my case, what ended up happening to me was, again, never really tried to get at the root cause of what was happening, but I later found out that this is all the stuff that was wrong with me before my hospitalization. So I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I had an intestine that was leaching bacteria, endotoxins, and food particles every time I was eating, which, by the way, like, it's theorized that a good portion of America and Western population has a lot of these things because we're all eating way too many emulsifiers, pesticides, and just like all the environmental exposures in the exposome. And I found this out because I got really elite medical care. So I found myself getting connected just through the tech network to a handful of these high-end concierge physicians. So doctors who are very much on the edge of science, some of the ones that Michael alluded to before, and they charge tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars for their care. And when you go to a clinic like this, they don't just spend 10 minutes with you like your average annual physical, they spend 10 hours with you, and they spend hours and hours on a whiteboard connecting this gene snip back to this patient presentation, back to this thing when you were 7, back to the fact that you were born C-section versus vaginally, because that can impact your microbiome, all the way to like, what do the personal care products in your home look like, because that can affect your endocrine system. And they help you figure out, okay, well, why did you have all these conditions? And in my case, we found out that I had a handful of key gene mutations in my detox pathways, as well as MTHFR, which is a gene that sort of regulates the way we methylate and process B vitamins, to put it overly simply. very high toxin load, mercury, arsenic, hormones, testosterone in the tanker. And these were all markers that were never tested for, measured, discussed, or at all part of the equation and conversation. Now, I got really curious the deeper I spent in this sort of frontier medical world, working with a handful of doctors. And I ended up getting connected to one physician who works with, folks like the Tim Cooks of the world. And you can read online, they're all pretty open about this. And it just got me thinking, why does Tim Cook and all these folks, who have money and are in the know, use the same iPhone as everybody else, but have access to radically different healthcare? And that was the light bulb moment where we realized this should not be the case. So more broadly, as technology evolves, it inevitably democratizes for the many what was previously once available for the few. And this has happened across the board in almost every space imaginable, right? Like only wealthy people in the 1800s had indoor plumbing. Now that's something ubiquitous we take for granted. Uber did the same thing with private drivers. And what's going to happen in the next decade is this high-end concierge longevity and root cause medicine services that you can spend a lot of money and time on through technology are going to get democratized. And that's really, the kind of thesis and the vision statement for what we're seeking to bring into the world with superpower. So the idea is, if healthcare were built today, if you actually had a primary care doctor who was enabled and empowered with all the data, the tools, technologies, innovations that we discussed today, what would that look like? Well, it would mean you'd have the first clinic ever run by an algorithm that was completely data-driven. You have something that was digital first and tech forward, a consumer experience as amazing and as iconic as things like Tesla and Apple and like the companies that we know and love, Instacart, Uber. These services are seamless. Why has that not yet been brought to healthcare? You'd have a brand and a community as vibrant and as exciting as Nike, something that like inspires people, right? A brand that people want to wear on their t-shirts and talk about at the dinner table. And ultimately, you'd build all of this with incentive alignment in mind, because incentives affect behavior, and ultimately there's too much entrenchment with the institutions that exist to make this level of care possible and low cost, because at the end of the day it's like who pays for it. And spoiler, it doesn't look like the healthcare institutions that we have today. So for anyone who's tried things like One Medical, HIMSS, which is sort of like the most bastardized yet simple, scalable, standard version of primary care, or even amazing institutions like the Mayo Clinic, they still have a lot of these challenges, and we're all going to experience the same kind of pain points and frustrations that we espouse today. HIMSS is a good example, and maybe analog for, though, what looks like scalable, cheap, accessible healthcare, right? They're like a multi-billion-dollar business. But it's challenging because it's like super impersonal. You go to hims.com or hers, these websites to get pharmaceuticals. You are trying to fix your hair loss problem, and you answer like 3 questions. The doctor basically checks the box, over-checking the algorithm, so to speak, and then you get your one-size-fits-all pharmaceutical prescription, which doesn't necessarily get at the root cause of the health problem, or the root cause of aging, or the root cause of whatever you're trying to optimize for. And it ignores the fact that you are different, that we're all different than the people next to us. So what if you had something that looked a little bit different, and a system that more or less did what Mark so presciently alluded to during the prior session, but effectively automatically ingested all of your healthcare data from all the environmental toxins you might be exposed to the way that you were born, to a full ingestion of all the SNPs and mutations that you might have been born with. And then as data gets better and better, imagine that data set on the left growing. You marry it with an AI model and a database of everything that we know about medicine. Spoiler alert, the best medicine does not exist in medical textbooks. It does not exist, therefore, in foundation models, but rather it's going to come from an ensemble of foundation models plus the brains of what we call like 10x doctors. I'm sure a lot of us in the tech industry have heard of this idea of like the 10x engineer, but there are these 10x physicians and chemists and biologists and frontier thinkers who observe medicine at like the more mechanistic level and have developed abstractions and understandings of how things work in the human body that are not written anywhere. And that's sort of very contrary to the way that academic medicine works today, right? You're basically looking at things in the binary. You're testing a null hypothesis, like did the berberine affect the glucose level, yes or no? Like it's not really actually getting at the mechanism of why. So there's a missing layer of understanding there that if you put those two things together from those two databases, and then you had a rank order database of all theoretical interventions that you could potentially intervene with to deal with something like hair loss, you now have a root cause protocol that is holistic and connects the dots for people and actually gets at the root cause of their hair loss. And now you can imagine a system like this treating everything from something as simple as hair loss all the way to complex diseases like type 2 diabetes, and that's really more or less what we're building at Superpower. So it's the doctor's clinic of the future, taking all of the advancements in AI, frontier testing, and then interventions, bring it all into one unified interface, and we're making it as accessibly priced and compatible with all commercially major insurers as possible. So thanks for listening. You can check us out and join our waitlist at superpower.com. We'll be live later this year. Question.
Smaller question. Could you please add Puerto Rico to the waitlist options? Right now, if you're in Puerto Rico, you can't even get on the waitlist.
Yeah, we're unfortunately U.S. only, but noted. We'll add it to the backlog. Yeah. It is? Okay. All right. Good to know. Amazing. I've heard it's a nice place. So we want to have a free version where we can ingest a certain amount of your data, get insurance-covered labs, and then insurance-covered humans.
So it's only insurance-based?
Yes. Yep.
So it's unaffordable?
Huh?
I'll have to have insurance.
Well, yeah. So in the U.S., most people their insurance is tethered to their employer, and we're going to be in network with 94% of commercially insured Americans.
A lot of people here that are running nonprofits that can't afford insurance, we can't afford this thing.
Hi. Yeah, good approach. I wondered if you have a network of doctors with specializations, like for neurodegenerative diseases and cancer, heart diseases, because it does require some specialty.
Yeah. So the ideas start simple, and then as we get more data, more capital, and the company grows, we can move into more complex conditions.
So your vision is great, right? I think we all agree. There are other people who have very overlapping or similar visions who are also trying to put together things like this. Obviously, right now, you don't say much publicly on the website. When you do launch later this year, how should people shop this versus other alternatives? Like, what are you going to actually share before somebody signs up about exactly what they get? Because, of course, the vision is great, but we know that for some number of years, we're going to have only subsets of that vision. So I guess what's your plan for exactly how you put together what's actually publicly shared, who your experts are, which things you actually get for your price, things like that, and which of your insurers you have matters for the price and all that other stuff.
Yeah, all great questions. So the reason that there's a graveyard of companies in this space, and that this is a really challenging problem, is that because there's a timing aspect to building this. Like just now, we are integrating with APIs and building blocks that didn't necessarily exist even 2 years ago. Some digital health infrastructure that is recently venture fund. We're like some of the first beta customers on these things. Companies like Forward Health and One Medical, they had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in R&D to build aspects of what we've been able to integrate with via API in a matter of weeks. So the timing is now, as far as the ability to create something like this. The other big challenge is that to really bring like a Medicine 3.0 company to life, it's many cross-disciplinary aspects of health that need to converge. One is logistics, right? Like healthcare is a huge logistics problem. It's like way harder than even like something like Uber, Lyft, and Instacart. And we have like the founders of Instacart and DoorDash and a handful of these CEOs like that are investors in us and have kind of brought their network and expertise. So we've brought a cabal of folks around the table to help us solve these challenges. The second pillar is informatics, right? So in the limit, we believe that healthcare is really an informatics problem. When you go to a physician, really what they're doing is they're matching a database of everything they know about you with the database of everything that they're pharmacologically able to intervene with. Except the challenge is those two databases are very, very limited today, and the matchmaking happens inside the brain of the rather limited human cognition. Now, if you were to exponentially expand the data sets and use AI and language models to connect that gap, you all of a sudden have like a more of a solved informatics problem. So we have an informatics. And the third is actually behavior change. So behavioral science. It's not enough to give people the best algorithm, the best recommendations. You then need to basically give people, free insurance covered humans to be able to work and coach and get over the edge. So those are some of the things and areas that we've built the team and built the company around in order to solve, because a problem like this is so challenging. As far as the exact offering, we'll send to anyone who joins the waitlist, we'll send like a private invitation link in the coming weeks and months as we onboard folks, because we're still doing a bit of experimenting between here and the ultimate vision.
All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Okay, thank you.